We're here with Sean Yoes on Profound Conversations, having a discussion about storytelling. And you were just talking about how it is important to tell your story. You're talking about social political discourse in storytelling. And you have written a book about the Freddie Gray conversation. In 2015, April, we were at the point of observing that reality where a black man was picked up, shoved into the back of a particular police vehicle. And when he emerged, he was not the same. And about a week later, he expired.
Yep.
Tell us about that, right? About your book and what's so important about your book, and give the authoritative title of that book. And how we need to get that book. Go ahead.
The book is a compilation of 50 columns that I wrote. I think it's 50 columns that I wrote for the Afro that really depict life in the city after the murder of Freddie Gray, right? Just to really give people a sense of what we were going through. The day that the uprising started, I was at Freddie's funeral. And I literally, when I found out that the uprising had jumped off, I just finished interviewing Baba Gregory.
Dick Gregory?
Dick Gregory.
Yes, sir.
And so what the church, New Shiloh Baptist Church, is on Monroe Street, like a couple of blocks up away from Mondawmin Mall, where the uprising had literally jumped off. My first instinct as a reporter was like, I gotta go up there. But Baltimore City was locked up. And so there was no way I was really gonna penetrate that perimeter that had been set at that point. And so like a lot of people, I watched the city get burned and the violence unfold. It was, I don't know what it's sometimes I feel several people had asked me in the last couple of weeks to come on their shows or their platforms and talk about my thoughts about the uprising. And I gently decided not to talk. I just didn't want to talk about it because in a way it feels like we're still living through not exactly the uprising, but it's just everything that led up to the uprising. It's still something. It's still different aspects of life in the city that manifest every day. And so it feels weird to me to talk about it in the past tense, even though it happened 10 years ago, because we're still living with the different manifestations of what caused the uprising. It wasn't, we know that a perfectly healthy young man, a 25-year-old man, got put into the back of a police van, and several hours later, he was removed from that van and 80% of his spine was destroyed, right? And then a week later, he transitioned. And the only thing he was guilty of that morning that he was put in the back of that van, him and his friends were trying to figure out what to have for breakfast. That was it. Freddie Gray was the precursor to the brother who died in Minnesota. George, his last name slipping out of my mind.
Floyd.
George Floyd. Freddie was the precursor to George Floyd. And it took literally people viewing the murder of George Floyd on tape, on film, for the country to kind of shift away from some things. And we see the country trying to lurch itself back in the other direction. But Freddie Gray, to a great extent, was the precursor to George Floyd. And then when you connect what our dear sister Marilyn Mosby attempted to do in holding the police officers who Freddie, who's in custody. Freddie was in when he died ultimately, trying to hold them accountable. We saw what the system did to her. She dared to go after one of the most powerful unions in the United States, the Fraternal Order of Police. And when I tell you that they attacked her and her husband and her family with a ferocity I've never seen before, and it was all about the fact that she had the nerve to challenge the authority of law enforcement in the United States. They thought that they could get away with what they've been getting away with for more than a century, with impunity. And that was, so it wasn't just that Freddie died and the uprising happened. It was also because Marilyn Mosby had the heart and integrity to try to seek justice for that brother and his family. So it was a powerful time, and the manifest it's still, it's still kind of playing itself out as our city tries to move away from being one of the more violent cities in the United States, and we're trying to take the time frame of the uprising and grow in our community and kind of heal in our community, and we're seeing that happen, and we're seeing that happen because young people who have been involved on the ground and older people who have been involved on the ground in the grassroots of Baltimore, we're getting our time now to do the work to heal our communities. And so I say all that to say that even though it was the tragedy of that young brother's murder happened, and then the subsequent uprising, we have been able to, as a community, across generations, across different, silos that we have built up, we've been able to heal our community in a very intentional and powerful way. And for that, these 10 years have been productive for us,
The narrative is so important about a person, a young man, being tossed in the back of a police vehicle and emerge as with the severed spine, right? The narrative of one who is simply walking around trying to find something to eat, who gets consumed in this, and also the voices of those who speak out against it and how they have to suffer because of it. And I thought about Ida B. Wells Barnett when you were speaking about Mosby, right? The idea of women speaking against the lynching of Black men, but Black people in general. I think it's powerful, and I don't want to. I think that's important. But you said something here also that I think is critical. You said that there has been a healing that's been facilitated. What healing have you seen that's come about as a result of this?
We've seen there were organizations that were literally born out of the uprising. I mean, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle was basically born out of, or had really came into its own in the days and months and years after the murder of Freddie Gray. You have an organization that we call Collectively, that I was in 2024, I was Collectively's residence and journalist in residence. Collectively was literally born during the uprising. It was under another name. But Brother Jamie Wooten really started his work in community as a result of the uprising. You see the rise of the Pennsylvania Avenue Arts District and Lady Breon. The uprising happened the same year that her dad died, and it sparked her in a culturally and as an artist, one of the top spoken word artists in the world. she really kind of came into her own during the uprising. We have other organizations that were birthed right around the time of the uprising. And it was a reaction to this atrocity that happened to our community. And through that atrocity, the healing came. And a lot of those organizations, LBS is still around. Lady Breon is still doing magnificent work now as the director, the founder of the Pennsylvania Arts District. Collectively has gone to another level. And now I find myself engaged in this filmmaking odyssey that I've entered into. And all of that stuff, I think these positive examples of storytelling and healing that came out of the uprising, it's remarkable to see, and I'm thankful.
I thank you for telling the story. The book is entitled Baltimore After Freddie Gray: Real Stories from one of America's great imperiled cities. And you mentioned about the criminality. Let me give it to you again. Baltimore After Freddie Gray: Real Stories from one of America's great imperiled cities. The story, the book, the voice, Sean Yoes is here. And you bring up a very powerful point that out of pain can come this progress. Out of tragedy can come triumph, right? Out of things that are very situationally volatile can become a show of success, of elevation. And so this storyline of a person being absconded by the police, and we know the narrative. We know the history of the police, the Patriots. We know the narrative that part of the conversations that they were in charge of gathering enslaved Africans as they ran from moved from the plantation. We know that Samuel Cartwright suggested that any particular, who was a psychiatrist, by the way, who said that if any particular person left the plantation, they suffer from what's called drapetomania, which is a flee from home madness. Some call it drapetomania. We know about this situation by which they said people were mad or crazy for simply wanting to be and to have a voice. Mm. But you show us clearly that no one should ever squelch your voice, because inside of your voice is the story. And the story of truth is one of healing, and one that can allow people to move from a position of powerlessness to recognizing their own personal power. They can move from a position of feeling less than and inferior to feeling that they have purpose. It is a process by which individuals can begin to read and see themselves and imagine themselves and reimagine themselves as something anew, because the story has come to them to show them that what they have believed themselves to be can be moved and transformed by some new thoughts, and they can have a new reality, and that they're better than anything that they've ever considered themselves not to be. So I thank you, Brother Sean Yoes, for this. And I thank you. I'm excited about the film process, and you have to let us know all about the filmmaking process that you engage in. I really love the narrative about A Different World, because that was a time, it probably was the last time that I really spent a lot of time watching television or being glued to particular situational comedies, because I remember I was in college at the time, and my mother, speaking of women of inspiration, my mother, I was coming out of college. There were 3 children at home. One was in high school, one was in middle school, and one was in elementary. My youngest brother, 16 years younger than I am. And so I think I graduated, and so she was finishing up her doctoral degree, and she would drive 3 hours on Saturdays to this college outside of this Shreveport, Louisiana. Mm. And so they had classes on Thursdays, and that's when Cosby's and Different World came on. Mm-hmm. And there I was driving her to Dallas, Texas, 3 hours to Dallas, Texas, from Shreveport, and driving her back. And that was the end, I think, of me watching situational comedies on a regular, because that was the only thing I really watched. And I think that we must recognize the power of those stories as well. Those 2 stories, one showed a community of what it meant to be and to have family with the Cosbys, and A Different World showed what it meant for families to put a child into college and have a collegiate experience. And as a former college, as a college professor, students to this day still say how a different world helped them to see themselves as students. Again, the power of storytelling. So we thank you, Sean Yoes, for being here and reminding us of the power of the voice through storytelling.
Amen.
This is Profound Conversations.